So one of the challenges interviewing Tristan is there's so many different things we could go to
There's a lot of things we can talk about.
And be at. And one thing I just also want to say about you is you're also kind of a spiritual explorer. I don't know what you would call that. Like, we met around kind of this inner transformational work that you were doing and I was doing around, whether it was Byron Katie or meditation.
I remember that in our first Wisdom 2.0 talk.
Yeah, and we met around that. And so I know that's kind of been a deep part of you, that you're kind of connected to both kind of the wisdom, mindfulness, transformation world, and you're also really connected to this social change world. And I'm curious, there's so many different places to go, but I'm curious, maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Is there some connection between those worlds? And in terms of your own activism, how does that connect?
That's a very interesting question.
It is. I didn't even know, I didn't think about it. I was going to ask that. It just
well, you're just like that. You always flow with what's the thing that's coming up.
Yeah.
You know, as I think about what you're saying, I think actually the thing that has allowed me to see some of the problems that's going on in technology is the same as the practice of meditation, where you're just actually, what can you notice? It's as simple as that. Because, for example, sitting there with social media, and you see that on WhatsApp it says the person was last online 4 minutes ago. And so sitting there, you might just say, oh, I need to message them back. Or they saw that I sent this message, or I haven't sent, and they're still online, last online 4 minutes ago. And you're noticing that you have the thought, oh, they know that I haven't responded yet, and I was just online.
Yeah.
But that's because you can just notice more of your internal experience to sort of see the way it's constituting your own psychology. So for me, in all the social media work, how many people here have seen The Social Dilemma? Okay, most of you. And what that was really about is how, you know, technology was constituting the psychological environment that 3 billion human social primates are inhabiting every day. And to see it that way, I think actually did come from a lot of my interior explorations and just seeing the scale of this, noticing that the thoughts that were triggered and coming up or being produced by the machine of social media were thoughts that everyone was having. And as you know, I also had this brief stint studying with this lab called the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab, where you understood that our mind has these levers of influence.
And so, as we look at the situation that we're in now, I think the social dilemma kind of presented the best understanding we have then of how the algorithms work. There was a lot I took away, but just the sophistication of the algorithms and how the algorithms are built for certain actions, and most of those actions are whatever it takes to keep you engaged, right? And so how now, as the AI has now entered into this world, what are your thoughts, concerns, dangers about what potentially that mentality and that strategy, if you will, infused with a more and more advanced AI?
Yeah, so to come back, I actually remember you and I having a phone call. It was one of our very, very first Zoom calls in 2014. I believe it was. I think I was in London. I was visiting Oxford with my friend.
2014?
2014,
oh, wow,
I believe.
Okay.
And even back then, you and I were talking about the race for attention and engagement. Now, why am I going here? Because Warren Buffett's business partner, Charlie Munger, said, if you show me the incentives of a system, I will show you the outcome. You show me the incentives, I will show you the outcome. How did we in 2014, predict that this machine would generate a more addicted, distracted, polarized, sexualized breakdown of truth society? Because if you know the business model or the incentive is showing whatever keeps you scrolling, that's going to produce more people scrolling for a long time. If you know the business model is getting you to come back, that's going to produce a lot of notifications that get you to come back.
Right.
If the business model is attention, I'm going to show you beautification filters that make you look more sexualized, even if you're 13 years old, because that gets the 13-year-olds coming back.
Wow.
And if I show you a personalized newsfeed just for you versus a newsfeed that tries to create some shared context, think about an app that's showing you just the things that keep you scrolling. That's going to be way better at keeping your attention than the thing that creates a shared reality. So right there, we just laid out 6 attributes of a future world And my friend said that we came up with this phrase, I felt like I had PTSD for the future, or pre-TSD, because I saw in 2014 that this was going to transform the nature of culture and society. Yeah. And here we are.
Here we are.
And I'm not saying this to take credit for, I'm saying this because here we are with AI. Yeah. And we're trying to now predict what's going to happen with AI. Yeah. And people say there's going to be the promise, unbelievable new accelerations in drug discovery. We got the first new antibiotic in 60 years from AI recently, in this last year. Yeah. We've got new efficient solar cells that just got invented by MIT. It's just unbelievable how many new amazing things we're going to get from AI. So that's the promise side. And then people say, but we're going to have the peril. You know, we're going to have mass surveillance. We're going to have drones that can recognize people's faces. And we're going to have AI that knows biology and can make dangerous things in biology. Yeah. How do we make sense of the promise or the peril? Which one are these?
This is why you're here. Yeah.
Well, which one of these are we going to get?
Yeah.
And so the tool I would want to use to try to figure out which future we're going to land in is, again, show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome. So the question is, what is the incentive with AI?
I mean, it depends on the person creating it, right? The people who's creating the drug discovery, is probably their incentive is maybe to make money, but also to create something that's helpful to humanity.
Yes.
On the technology side, on the social media side, it's probably the same engagement.
It's engagement, right. So good. So we're noticing that there's different incentives for a few different kinds of actors. So if you're a drug discovery company, your incentive is to make great drugs that help people. If you're a social media company and your incentive is to maximize attention, now you have this new tool called AI. Yeah. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to take the exact same machine and then just supercharge how that whole thing works. So that's not going to be great. But if we go even deeper, how do we predict the future? We at Center for Humane Technology, so our organization, we focus on how the races, these competitions for something. So in social media, it was a race for attention and engagement. With AI, we call it the race to rollout. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, are all competing to roll out these brand new AI models. So we got GPT-2 just 4 years ago that couldn't even count from 1 to 10. And GPT-4, just like 4 years later, is the level, can pass the MCAT, pass the bar exam, and can be basically an early college student level of IQ and capability. That's crazy. Yeah. But it's going, you might say, why is it all going so fast? And it's because if I don't release the next model, the next impressive GPT-5, and Anthropic releases the next Claude 4, I'm just going to lose. And by the way, I won't be able to hire the next greatest AI talent if I'm behind in the race. I won't be able to raise the venture capital if I'm behind in the race. And by the way, even if I have a good faith and I care about AI safety, I've heard this from the AI labs, if I want to influence policy in Washington, D.C. for safety, to get things right, they won't listen to me if I'm a third-tier AI player. So even if you care about the good things that society needs in policy, you have to participate in the race to roll out. So if we want to predict which future we're ending up in, I would argue strongly that the race to roll out, which becomes the race to take shortcuts and deploy things faster than society knows how to metabolize that change, is the world that we are getting, and I think we are currently getting, and we're starting to see that now.
So I think this was last year, but Facebook had posted a kind of somewhat of a brag that in Q4, their advancements in their AI increased user time on Instagram by 24%, I believe, right?
So say that again. So advancements in AI increased time on Instagram by 24%. 24%.
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
Right, exactly. And which is how I'm sure it was higher than they wanted.
Right.
The challenge is that it's not going to, 24% is bad enough, but the challenge is it's not going to stop at 24%, right?
No, it's going to keep
going.
going.
50%, 60%. And we live in a potential world where a young person signs on to some kind of platform. Yep. The intelligence is so smart and knows so much data about that person. It's an unfair battle between their own quality of life, which includes friends and being outdoors and meditation and exercise, and what the algorithm offers them to be enticing. Right. So even if there's no killer robots,
that's right.
Even if there's no killer robots and no craziness, there is this capacity in which the system gets to know you, and the system uses that intelligence to then keep me for its goal, which is to stay on board.
Yep.
And asking,
go ahead.
Well, and asking young people asking young people to not be motivated by that is a little bit like saying, listen, we want you to eat mindfully, we want you to control your diet, but you're going to walk around all day with a buffet in front of you.
Yeah. And
you're going to be told to only eat so much. It's like, what do you mean it's a buffet? Yeah,
yeah, and it's not one static buffet. It's a buffet that has multi-trillion-dollar tech companies with hundreds of engineers going to work every day to rearrange the items and redesign all of the foods to add different combinations of salt, sugar, fat, with the most sophisticated AI that's ever been built pointed at their brain every single day to reverse engineer how their reptile brain works and what it responds to perfectly for them.
Yeah.
So when TikTok sees your 13-year-old, it has already today seen 2 billion other human mammals responding to things before, when they scroll their finger like this to see what's going to come next, it uses all of that information from 2 billion other people to figure out the perfect thing to show them.
Yeah.
And it's just seen this game too many times before. So if you think, if you imagine, they have DeepMind, Google's company, has a demo of an AI playing StarCraft. Do you all know what StarCraft is, like the video game? It's one of these, war games, and you move your units and your tanks. And the AI learned how to play StarCraft better than all the human players. Mm-hmm. Because if you sit there and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to move my tank here, and then I'm going to attack their thing. But the AI just plays out every scenario and can win at that game.
I think they said that if you start an AI that knows nothing about chess, by 5 p.m. that day, it will be a grandmaster because it plays itself so many different times.
Exactly, self-play.
It's playing that with us.
That's right.
Now, the question I have, though, is...
We're being played, literally.
Being played. Now, and I think that that's very, very true of advertising and social media, but some of the AI leaders are like, we see this problem. We don't like this problem, right? The fact that when I do a Google search and I click on to get information, I've got to see tons of ads, and the information I seek is somewhere in this article somewhere. Very hard to get to. We're going to create smart AI where you say, what is the data you need, what's the information you need, and we're going to just deliver it to you directly. And we're not going to have ads. We're just going to have, pay for the certain amount for the highest or for the latest version. But we're actually trying to solve some of these problems that you see happening because we're a different kind of platform.
Yep.
Do you see that as a positive motion, or do you see that, well, that's still going to go down the same path because they need to bring in money? And because in some ways, I think some of the AI, not all the AI, but some of the AI would be like, yeah, we're totally with you. We're actually trying to help.
Yeah. So there could be some potential good news or good ways that this could go that you're pointing at. So one is, if AIs get so good at producing deepfakes that are genuinely indistinguishable from regular stuff, and now social media becomes this wasteland of now no one literally knows what's true there because it's all user-generated content, and you just don't know what's real.
It's all computer-generated content.
Computer-generated, right? Maybe that would result in all of us saying we can't use social media anymore, and that could be a really powerful way to get off of social media. Because, to your point I think you're making, is that ChatGPT can say, hey, instead of having to scroll through this minefield with a supercomputer pointed at your kid's brain, use ChatGPT or Anthropic, and we'll summarize all this information for you and just give you exactly what you need so you don't have to scroll through all that stuff. And like you said, their business model could be aligned with that by saying, if you pay us a subscription fee, then we're not incentivized to steer our answers or show you more stuff.
Or product placement in the
product placement.
in the thing,
But I'll tell you, we're based.
And I'm not saying, I'm just asking the question because I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we're just exploring this in real time. But our organization's based in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and we know a lot of people at the labs. There are active conversations and pressures inside some of these companies in which their business teams are saying, hey, what if we skewed the answers towards the things that an advertiser paid us to steer people towards? So we saw this whole story play out with social media before. We should learn a lesson and pass a law now that says, let's not have these systems be incentivized to give you things just for what's good at getting your attention, because we know exactly where that pulls you. What I really want to see is an incentive-literate society. An incentive-literate society means we understand where those incentives take us to which bad outcomes. So again, if you're racing for attention, then we don't want to make sure we're monetizing attention to the end game. That's the addicted, polarized, distracted thing. And we say we don't want to do that. If the incentive is, if Instagram, don't go after a 13-year-old user and TikTok does, then I just lose the race. Everyone's racing to get 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds. because the earlier I get them, I have them for life. If we don't want that to happen, we have to change that incentive. We don't allow you to monetize, under teen users. And I'm really happy to say that since the social dilemma, there's been a number of amazing positive changes, especially for kids. Jonathan Haidt, how many people here have read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation? Highly recommended. He was in the social dilemma. He's a deep ally of ours. And without passing any laws or having to deal with the government, he's getting schools and getting parents to turn their school phone free. He gives you a template text message you can send to the superintendent or the teachers and say, get a parents group together on WhatsApp. We can self-organize to say we don't want social media in the school and we don't want smartphones to be the norm in the school. You can still have your smartphone outside of school, just not in the school. And that's already starting to happen. And right now it's happening with the wealthy schools, but not with the rest of the world. And I think, though, over the next 3 years, there could be all of this change if we start to change those incentives.
So on a school level, amazing, right?
Yeah.
I think kids, if they were in school and they did not have that lure of the phone and curiosity of the phone, it would be positive.
Yeah.
How do we change the incentive structure? So it seems like in terms of changing the incentive structure, it's either, there's three things that come to mind for me. One is the government just comes in and says, here's the regulations. When you share data or give an answer in the AI, it has to look like this. And if we see you putting ads in or putting product placements or other things, we're going to penalize you, right? The other is that the public cares about that so much that the most ethical AI gets all of our users, right? We're going to go to this AI instead of this AI because we understand that they have values and we're going to choose to go with values. Are you seeing a different model? What are our ways of shifting those larger incentive models? Am I missing some, or where do you think our best shot is in that?
Yeah, so I want to point out a distinction, something that's different with social media than with the AI companies. So what you're talking about, just to round trip what you said, is will people choose the AI that has the business models that align with them? So for example, if ChatGPT starts to say, we're going to maximize attention and engagement, and they start giving you answers that do all that whole thing, people might say, we don't want to use you anymore, we'll use the ones that we want to use. That would be possible with an AI, with AI chatbots, because you're not locked into them. So think about, by contrast, social media. If Facebook starts to do the aggressive maximize attention thing, but all of my contacts are on Facebook and they're not on Snapchat or TikTok or whatever else, I can't switch out of that thing. These are what we call network effects. And the people who designed Facebook and the social media companies, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, they know this and they design to rope everybody in. It's a collective action problem. It's, by the way, the reason why kids can't just not use one product, because all of their friends are also on Snapchat or TikTok. And unless everybody moves together, they're locked in. And so one difference is that what you're talking about, if Facebook started to act in an ethical way, people would just use Facebook more. That's not going to work because of the network effect problem. But it could work more with the way that chatbots work. My concern would be that I think it's all about what we care about the most. At the end of the day, it's convenience and whatever works the best. And if, let's say, ChatGPT worked faster and the response times were faster, then I'm going to use that over Claude, which maybe is slower but does it in an ethical, humane way.
And we're just using these examples.
These are just examples.
Because it does feel that the incentive structure has to shift, but that the people we're all part of the problem, would you say? The humans are part of the problem?
Say more.
Well, because, for example, if we care about speed more than we care about values, and we're choosing companies that don't have values because of speed, it's like clicking the ads that say, look at this stupid thing this politician did, and we're clicking it. We're saying basically we want more of this, right? And there's other articles that we don't click that could be much more deeper. So the people are kind of, either we're supporting it, or can you tell us more about what our responsibility is? Yeah.
Well, we have to note where there's an asymmetry of power. So what I hear you saying is, are people just, how do people take responsibility for continuing to click on the clickbait or continuing to get sucked into
and reinforcing some of those same cycles, which is a little bit like the buffet thing. I gave an example. Some of it's just like, it's almost ridiculous to ask, but it also feels like it is an important piece of the puzzle.
Well, we obviously, if we all had a clear-eyed view of the situation, and then you saw how toxic this was and how much it was hurting mental health, and and people still chose it after fully understanding all of that, we obviously have to take some responsibility once we know. But the companies right now don't want people to know that all these things are problems because it's not their incentive. We also have to, again, realize the asymmetry of power. It's like, I could say I want to have more self-control, but I have a supercomputer with $1 trillion market cap company pointed at my brain. That's not a fair fight. And so until that's a fair interaction, an equal interaction, it's not about personal responsibility. And the other way it's not a fair fight, again, is the network effect, that they caught all of my friends roped in, and teenagers who literally say, I saw Social Dilemma, I don't want to use social media anymore, but I noticed that when I shut down my TikTok account, I literally don't know what my friends are doing, and I don't know where to go hang out with them, because they're only sending messages on that service. So that's another way that the fight is unfair. But I think the question you're asking is also kind of a defining question of our species. When we talk about AI, we often talk, Asa, my co-founder, and I, about how AI is kind of inviting humanity into kind of a rite of passage. How many people here know the marshmallow test from psychology? A bunch of, okay. In this community, people would know the marshmallow test.
Well, some people are watching on YouTube, so we might want to describe it briefly.
We'll describe it. So it's a psychology experiment that they did at Stanford, where you sit these kids down, and it's a test of self-control and delayed gratification. So they get in front of the kid and they say, okay, I'm going to give you this marshmallow now, you can have it, or if you wait, I'm going to put this marshmallow here, I'm going to leave the room, I'm going to come back in 10 minutes and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. Do you think you can wait to have the 2 marshmallows?
While it sits right in front of you.
While it sits right in front of you. And there's this great video online where the people leave the room and then it just watches what do different kids do. And a lot of the kids are sitting there and they smell it and then they touch it and then they lick their, and they put it back. But they're squirming. Some kids are really having a hard time. And one of the things that we often say in our work is that AI and social media are kind of a question of, are we the 1 marshmallow species or are we the 2 marshmallow species? If we are the 1 marshmallow species, we do not have great prospects for the future. And I know what many of you are thinking. If you look outside, you go out there in the world, it looks like we're a 1 marshmallow species. But the reason I'm here, the reason we do...
instant gratification now.
Yes, instant gratification now. So 1 marshmallow means I want the 1 marshmallow now, instant gratification society. 2 marshmallow species means we can see the consequences of our actions, we can withhold, and we can consciously make discerning choices about what we want. I know that it looks like we're a 1 marshmallow species. The whole reason, I think this community, the community you've brought together, and what it represents is we are capable of much more than the 1 marshmallow version of ourselves. And social media isn't a mirror of society. It is a funhouse mirror that has warped and reflected back the image that we've been getting back for so long that we see everybody else caught in that 1 marshmallow instant gratification thing that it's confused our sense of who we are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
And the reason that we do this work is we believe deeply that we can be a 2 marshmallow species. And if you've done the inner work, you know that it's possible.
And that humans are inherently beautiful and conscious and loving.
Yes, we're capable of all that. We are capable of navigating our way out of this, but we have to actually collectively occupy that 2 marshmallow place. And then when it comes to everything with AI, like US and China and all these agreements we have to sign, we collectively need to be, as a world, 2 marshmallow. And I know how hard and impossible that sounds, but that is what we need to do because the alternative is not acceptable.
100%. Now, what does government, what are the levers to increase the likelihood of that? And I know awareness is one, like you all are trying to present, here's actually, let's become more educated about the potential here. So that I would say awareness would be one of those levers, but what's your sense of the levers that would increase the likelihood that we would become that more, less narcissistic, less dopamine focused, less me, and more towards a sense of togetherness, and more towards a sense of balance, and more towards a sense of knowing how to love one another and nature and beings and all that.
That was all beautiful. I mean,
I was getting going there for a second.
So we just kind of talked about whether a single human being, a human mammal, can be a 1 marshmallow version of them or a 2 marshmallow. What it requires are incentives that incentivize us to be 2 marshmallow organizations, 2 marshmallow countries, rather than I win now by reaching first. Because when you talk about what will enable the good future with AI, it's if right now the race to roll out, the race to take shortcuts, the race to deploy as fast, as quickly as possible is like AI companies that are the one marshmallow version of themselves.
Yeah, right.
And it's not, in that case, when they're organizations, like what's the subjectivity? Does the organization of OpenAI meditate and notice that it's wanting the marshmallow it can't do that because it's not one subjective experience. I mean, there is a CEO and there's decision making and there's a board, but we saw OpenAI got rid of its board and
and different CEOs change.
And different CEOs change. And so what that means is it's not, what affects the behavior of an organization is that we have different incentives for those organizations.
Yeah.
So if we have one marshmallow incentives that has everybody race to get in social media, I have to grab the 13-year-old before my competitor gets them. That's the one marshmallow tech company. And we need incentives that say, no one can go after that because we don't want to go after kids. That's the two marshmallow incentives.
And is that government the only one that can change that incentive?
Well, first what it requires is everybody agreeing. We live in democracy, so you need to have what's called the Overton window, meaning enough of a percentage of a population who say, yes, that's what we want.
Yeah.
I'm excited about John Haidt's book because he's moving the Overton window. The Social Dilemma, which is now curriculum in so many schools,
100 million views,
150 million views around the world, is moving the Overton window. The Surgeon General of the United States, who you've had on this stage, he's moving the Overton window. He just did a thing a few months ago where he asked that we put warning labels on social media products, just like the Surgeon General warning on tobacco. Just yesterday, I believe it was, the 42 attorney generals endorsed that we need to have a warning label on social media companies. That's the 42 attorney generals.
Wow.
We just, by the way, had, within the last year, these 42 attorney generals suing Meta and Instagram for intentionally addicting children, just like what happened with big tobacco.
Yeah, wow.
So if I want to tell you, thank you, I think we should all be applauding this. If you look back at the history of big tobacco, how did it change? Actually think for a moment. In this room, in the 1960s, this exact room, assuming this building was here, everyone in this room in the 1960s would have been smoking. Just imagine that for a second. You're in this room. It's filled with smoke. Yeah. Okay? I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying, now imagine I told you on the stage back then, 60 years from now, no one in this room is going to be smoking. You look around you, you see what everyone's doing, you're like, that is never going to happen. I sound crazy. We turned that around. Yeah. What's that? C. Everett Koop.
The
Surgeon General, yes, exactly. And what did that take? Well, a lot of the things that we saw. We saw Jeffrey Wigand, the 60 Minutes whistleblower, who blew the whistle in 1996. We saw the attorney generals file their 50-state lawsuit against the tobacco companies on behalf of their citizens who'd been harmed. We saw the film The Insider that kind of publicized that, like a social dilemma, right? We saw media change, where media started to tell a different story, where now it wasn't cool to smoke inside of buildings. We changed social norms. And you flash back, and I believe the stat is that we saw the Truth Campaign as well. The Truth Campaign, remember that? The body bags in front of the tobacco companies' offices? All of that happened, and I believe, since we just looked this up recently, that we went from 23% of all teens, or 60% of all teens used to smoke, and now like less than 2% of teens smoke cigarettes. And that took a ton of time. That happened over like 50 years. Yeah. With the social media problem, let's really look at the timeline.
Yeah. We don't have 50 years.
We don't have 50 years, exactly. 2017, I actually came out on 60 Minutes, and we did a big interview with Anderson Cooper, right, who you've had on this stage. We had the social dilemma, create mass culture. Yeah. We had the Surgeon General's warning for social media now. We have now had the 42 state attorney generals suing. Yeah. So we're actually on the big tobacco timeline with social media. And I know it doesn't feel that way because the experience inside of social media and the actual products has not shifted. In fact, you could say it's gotten worse. But there's sort of different things in culture. The technology might be veering further in the race to the bottom of the brainstem, but the law and culture are now catching up.
Beautiful.
Now, and so we need to do much more of that.
I totally with you in that in terms of that movement. I think the challenge that we have is it's very clear when I'm smoking and when I'm not smoking.
Yeah.
It's often not very clear when I'm immersed in a dopamine a world that's AI impacted or not, right?
Yeah.
Like I check my email and I kind of like that AI went through and put all the spam emails
Oh,
away,
sure.
and I can see that.
But
And so
notice
there's
that it's
a-
not
just-
that notice
go ahead.
that it's not that AI is bad, because that's a perfect example. AI that detects all that spam that you don't even see now because it's been so good
Yeah.
and hides that. That's an AI that's aligned with your incentives.
Yeah.
Because people don't make money when Google doesn't make money when they show you more of all the garbage spam.
Yeah, yeah.
They need your trust. They're competing
Yeah.
for your trust, not for just maximizing your email attention.
Yeah. So one of the things I think about, and the Surgeon General has also talked about this quite a bit, is the more lonely, isolated, and disconnected I am from myself, the more likely the algorithms can play on me because it's serving something in me that is hollow.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you have thoughts that if we become actually a more connected, loving population, would we naturally then expect the algorithms and the AI companies and the social media companies to adhere to certain basic values? But as long as we're depressed and lonely and isolated, and where do we begin to shift that?
This is actually an interesting thing because you're pointing out a feedback loop, right? The more you use social media by yourself, the longer you scroll, longer than you forgot, longer than you realized, the more lonely and empty you feel and disconnected you feel. And from that state, the more vulnerable you are to the high fructose corn syrup version of connection that's served up in the feeds. And so there's a bad feedback loop. And now you might say, we're just giving people what they want. But again, that actually that's what the tech companies think, by the way. Our friends, people that we know, the way that you still work at TikTok or Facebook every day is you convince yourself of the story that we're just giving people what they want, even though we made them lonely in the first place, and then now they're actually stuck in this bad loop. And again, we had this fate where, are we actually lonely and disconnected?
Yeah.
Or have we been so deeply trapped in the funhouse mirror that reflects back that version of ourselves that we've forgotten that we know how to belong and be with each other and be kind to each other? And let me give you a very concrete example of how it could work differently. If Facebook's business model was not maximizing engagement, when you open up any social media app today, it could be just a list of events that you could go to in your local area with friends and communities that you want to be a part of, like your existing friend groups. It could have your threads for who's basically bringing people together for a discussion night, for a podcast that's stimulating us, or a movie that we want to watch and make some change together, or a knitting club, or a sewing club, or an acro yoga group, or whatever the thing is. And instead of just saying it's a passive event of things I can scroll, it could be all about making it super easy to bring people together. Like, how easy are the tools to create an event that brings people together in physical space right now? They're not that great. Imagine if we applied all of those, think of the 1,000 engineers who've been working at Facebook to try to make the clickbait machine work better over the last 10 years, those PhDs. Imagine taking all those PhDs and all that engineering and applying it to how do we make it better and easier to bring people together for everybody? How fast could you reforest the social fabric?
And China, doesn't China do some of that, mandate some of that?
China does not quite that, but they, I famously talked about this in 2022. We did a 60 Minutes interview. I don't know if you all know this, they regulate TikTok domestically in China. So if you open up TikTok in China, you get what we call the digital spinach version of TikTok. So if you scroll, you get patriotism videos, education videos. Literally, I had a friend who's Chinese show me his app. He had 2 TikToks. He opened up the one that was from China. The first video was a speech Xi Jinping gave. The second video was about who won the Nobel Prize in quantum physics. The third video was explaining quantum physics. The fourth video was financial advice to how to make money.
Wow.
And then he closed that app and he opened up the TikTok US app, which we call the sort of digital fentanyl version of TikTok. And it was all of the worst things that we all know. And you can have a very pessimistic view of what's going on with those choices. You could say they intentionally want that to happen, or you could say they actually see that technology is kind of constituting their culture and they're regulating it. And we're not doing that. I'm not saying we should do what they're doing. By the way, they also do a thing where at 10 p.m. at night, it's lights out if you're under 14. So if you open up a TikTok or social media or a gaming app after 10 p.m., it will just say it's closed, just like CVS. Maybe not in New York, but and when you open up again at 6 in the morning, not until 6 or 7 in the morning, it opens back up again. And the point is that stops the social pressure dynamic, because one of the biggest issues with social media is overuse late at night. You're super depleted, you're lonely, you're compressed your esophagus, you're not breathing, your self-control is way down. It's 1 in the morning and you just get lost scrolling. And they know that, and they know the pull of everybody else being in that state, so they clip out that part of the attention economy.
One time I reached out to Instagram because wouldn't it be cool in Instagram if every 10 or 15 posts you get some positive message, like you're beautiful and go outside. And so I reached out to them. I'm like, of course they'd want to do this, right? There's all this negative stuff on teens' mental health. I'll help them create these really beautiful, supportive posts. And I can't. You will not believe this. You will not believe this. But when I presented the idea to them, they didn't take it. I know you're shocked, but they were just no, that's not going to happen.
But even this is actually a great example
because why wouldn't they do it?
This is a great example because even in the case where Instagram said, okay, we're going to give people the most positive content that's going to help them be not lonely, Instagram will only be interested in people's sense of belonging and connection so long as it involves the same amount of screen time on Instagram.
Yeah, that's the incentive thing.
And that's the incentive thing. Because the thing that actually, you remember from our work back in 2013, we had this movement called the time well spent movement. The whole essence of that movement was about technology that's not trying to maximize the time spent, but about all the design choices and all of the algorithms and all of the ways that it all works are meant to help you spend your time well as a world.
Now, to their credit, they do have something we can set a time limit, 20 minutes, and then it pops up and says you've spent 20 minutes. And
do you mean on the Apple
the Instagram Apple version of that? I have that. But there is some, just to acknowledge, there's a ton of things they're not doing, but there is something that they have done.
So Instagram did a tiny thing. We actually helped with some of our work early on in 2017, helped catalyze some of the reason why all of you on your iPhones have the screen time feature that lets you set a limit and even shows that back. Even turning the phrase screen time, which didn't really exist in culture as a concept, into a concept. But that's not enough because it's what determines whether you use your phone for a lot or a little isn't just whether you get a reflection of how much time you've spent. Because what determines it is, again, the supercomputer pointed at your brain manipulating your weaknesses every single day.
So if you have young people, you're suggesting the least time they spend, the better, knowing that they probably will spend some time or what's your guidance? Like for me, I want to create I want to find a company that I can support and fund that's value-based and has a different experience for young people because I've kind of given up on convincing them. But I would love to see that happen. Now you could say, well, it's always, if the incentives are wrong, but I do feel like teens naturally, particularly young, naturally need a place to communicate. And you could create potentially that with some ethical standards. I could be wrong, but that is an intention. But how do you support people, particularly young people who've my whole social life is going to be ruined now, Tristan. I heard you talk and now my life is ruined.
Well, no, so this is where I would defer to John Haidt's recommendations because he has done a decade of the research of really doing it. We're an alliance. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's basically phone-free schools, no social media, I believe.
Before 16,
Before 16, no smartphone until, I can't remember what the age is for that one.
Or maybe 16 is or social media is a smartphone. Yeah, I know. And then there's maybe a time at night where something goes off. I can't remember.
I don't know. I can't remember that one. We did a good podcast episode with John. We have a great podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and we did a great interview with him, and he walks through all of it. So I highly recommend if you care about that. You might say, how are we going to solve this problem? If we have a supercomputer pointed at our brain, how are we going to fight that? And I wanted to share, knowing that we're coming more to a close, is one solution that my co-founder Asa came up with that I'd love to share with you.
Please.
So my co-founder, Asa, his father was Jeff Raskin. I don't know if how many people here know who that is. He started the Macintosh project at Apple. So the Macintosh, which everybody uses now, the MacBooks, et cetera, his father invented that with the idea of the Humane interface, an interface that is ergonomic to how people's minds work. So just like this chair is ergonomic to my back, right? And if I sit in it for a long period of time, a chair that's ergonomic, is sustainable, one that's not, is not. But Asa actually later in his career is the unfortunate inventor of infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is the design technique that when you're done scrolling through the first 10 Google results, instead of making people click, I want to see more Google results and loading the other page, that it instead would just keep scrolling more Google results. He invented infinite scroll before there was social media, so before there was any doom scrolling. He invented it for search result pages or blog sites. So you read one article, and instead of having to click back to the homepage, it would scroll again, and you could see the other articles. So it sounds like a good invention. And because he invented infinite scroll and watched how it got sucked up by this engagement attention machine, he's thought a lot about what would it take to reverse all that.
Yeah.
So he came up with a really interesting idea I just wanted to share with you, which is Amazon famously found that for every 100 milliseconds that their website loads slower, they lose 1% of their revenue.
Wow.
So
we're that impatient.
We're that impatient. We're that much of the subtly one marshmallow oriented species.
Yeah.
And so, and designers know that, and that's why they work on minimizing the latency. So that's why when you scroll TikTok, it's like, boom, it's right there. The video is just playing because you don't want people to make decisions. You want them to be sucked into the decision you're making for them.
Netflix autoplays the next.
Netflix autoplays the next thing, you know. And it wasn't always like that. But so how would you fix all this? So what Asa actually did is he wrote himself software, basically a VPN. So when he opens up Twitter or TikTok, what it does is after about 10 minutes, it randomly adds between 0 and like 400 milliseconds of latency. So he's scrolling, and the things still load, but it gets just subtly slower. And it's like you're on an airplane, and you're trying to, you know, open up Twitter, and it's like it's loading, but it's not loading, but it's loading, but it's not loading, and you just kind of get frustrated and you do something else. Right? So what that does is it's actually better than the screen time controls that are currently in the phone, because when you say, hey, you've been using it for 20 minutes, but you're in this hot state where you just get out of my way, I want to keep scrolling. Instead, this is actually ergonomically meeting the human mind and how it actually works.
Wow.
So this latency idea really works at getting you unaddicted in that moment. But then now let's take this idea and say, how would we do some, maybe some laws or just an idea, a prototype.
If you were a dictator, if you were the dictator for a day.
Well, let's say.
Some people do want to be the dictator for a day, but.
I don't want to be dictator for a day, but if you imagine there was some kind of democratic body that said, okay, we now know because of the social dilemma and John Haidt's work and all these people who are working on this every day, that there's all these harms, inability to disconnect, loneliness, social comparison, self-harm, suicides. Okay, and then what we do is we say, we're going to give each of these major bad apps a scorecard. How much is TikTok contributing to inability to disconnect versus how much is YouTube contributing to inability to disconnect? Do you notice the difference? YouTube doesn't try to say, oh, you can't disconnect right now because your friends want to do all these things with you. It doesn't do that. But Snapchat, with its streaks feature, it does do that. It makes it really hard to disconnect. So Snapchat would get an F on the inability to disconnect, and YouTube would get maybe an A. Now this democratic panel would say, guess what? All these social media companies, we're going to impose a latency tax. So based on your A to F rating, you're going to get a random slowdown between 0 and 500 milliseconds, and we're not even going to enact it now. We're going to say it's coming in 6 months. If you don't change your behavior and fix the inability to disconnect, we're going to get taxed. It's like a carbon tax. It's like a carbon tax for social media. And the cool thing about it is it directly attacks the moment of choice, which is when your finger's doing that. So what the cigarette tax was, there you are in the convenience store, and the price of it is this, and it just makes it a little bit higher, so now people do it less. The latency tax, you have to do it at this point in the... It
costs more time.
It costs more time, but it actually costs more like it costs more marshmallows. It's like it's more reptilian than that. But anyway, I wanted to leave you with that because this is an example of a whole suite of solutions that we believe are possible. But we have to get clear-eyed about the nature of the problem. We were talking backstage that Charles Kettering famously said, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And a problem that is not well stated is unsolvable. If we allow ourselves to be confused by the Facebook's making the world more open and connected, and TikTok is helping people share themselves, express themselves, and those are partial stories, but it's not the underlying truth of how the machine is working. So if we don't fall for the stories and we all put on our X-ray vision and see the incentives first, and then work to change those incentives, I guarantee you we can live in a much better world.
Beautiful. Wow. I think that's a great place to end.
Great.
Tristan Harris, to find you, Center for Humane Technology.
Yes.
Do not follow you on social media or possibly on social media. You have somebody on your team doing some things.
Yeah, you can check out we have a podcast called Your Undivided Attention. We're a nonprofit. We do a lot of great work in the world. We have a course, Foundations of Humane Technology.
Oh, right.
You're welcome to check out. It's free. And we're trying to tackle some big problems, so we'd love to keep working with you all.
Yeah, and one just thing to say about Tristan is I don't know of anyone as passionate as he is in terms of really taking on what we think is a really, really important challenge. And so thank you so much for just holding that as a focus, because I know it's not easy to carry the weight of a very complex problem and try to figure out paths through when there's big players involved and lots of money and lots of complexity. And so just deep thank you for holding that for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you all.